Hello, MJ. How are you today?
Hi, Cheryl.
So
I'm
good.
glad to be here.
Yes, it's so good to see you. Even though we are talking about betrayal trauma, which is not always a fun subject, but we've had some time together already where we're talking, doing some introduction, talking a little bit about our story. To this series, as part of the series, we want to take a deep dive into betrayal trauma. Let's figure out what it is and learn from the expert, from a very credentialed expert here on what betrayal trauma is. We're going to be telling my story, and then she's going to comment on what was happening to me that I certainly was not aware of then.
Yes, Cheryl, we want to use your story and what happened to you to be able to help other people relate your story to theirs, relate your experiences to theirs, so they can understand what betrayal is, how it's impacted them, and have some understanding as to uh, why they felt and behaved as they did in the aftermath of betrayal.
Yes, yes, thank you. And another disclaimer I'm going to give is this is a happy ending. This is a happy ending. We have a happy ending here, and you can have a happy ending too. And that's my heart, and that's MJ's heart for you to have a happy ending. Um, John 10:10 tells us that Jesus came to give us life and give us abundant life. And a lot of people in the faith stream, MJ, know that verse and they love that verse. But what do we need to do to get there and keep it? And I knew that as I was going through a lot of this pain and heartache, that Jesus died for me to have an abundant life. And I was going to do what I needed to do to get there. What was my part to get there? And so coming across a lot of the things that I've come across listening to you and uncovering your videos, which we've talked about in a previous episode, we want to refer people back to that, just really helped me understand that, what I was going through was really, really real.
Yes,
So do you
it
want to talk
helps
a
me.
little bit about some of the, we talked about triggers and sort of giving that disclaimer?
Yes, you and I really had eyes on wanting to care for our listeners, not only by giving them information, by helping them understand what betrayal is, what betrayal trauma is, how trauma impacts people, but we also wanted to care for them by giving our listeners a trigger warning, a disclaimer that this video today and our videos during the series can be triggering. And we want to encourage our listeners to listen to us in small doses, take breaks if necessary, care for their bodies, their mind, um, really do good self-care so that they can ingest the information and help this make sense to them while also um, not tanking,
Yeah.
while also getting support, so that they can get all of the good messages out of what we're trying to share.
Yes, thank you for doing that because and I would really encourage everybody to pause and go ahead and get you a drink now and get comfortable because we there's a lot to cover. We want to try to cover it in a short amount of time, but it's still a lot of information.
And Cheryl, I want to say you encouraging our listeners to drink water, to get something to drink. That is one of the best and easiest ways to care for our bodies. When we're dehydrated, we humans can struggle to regulate our emotions. When we are hydrated, when we drink water, that is an easy and maybe accessible way to regulate our emotions by hydrating our brains. So I love that you just said, get some water, get something to drink. Let's start with that as we jump in.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're going to start with a little bit more about my story, and then feel free to jump in. I don't take it as interruption if you just like this is the point I need to make. But we'll start with the season of my life that I call getting a clue. We had just celebrated our 30th anniversary. We lived in a small Texas town, North Texas, rural community. We would have won the Republican conservative evangelical couple of the year, I think, in many, many years, if there had been such a thing. That was our life, was church and school with the kids. And so I'm going along, living life pretty well at this point, almost 50 at that point. My mom had had brain surgery 3 years before and had basically left her as a stroke victim. And so she was very, very frail. She had, over those 3 years, become more and more frail and just digressing. And so when I got my clue, which I'll describe that a little bit more in a second, but when I got my clue, my first thought was just to save her, to keep her from knowing this that I felt would kill her, just to destroy her. So, yeah, so I'm head of women's ministry. Like I said, we had 3 children, 3 sons. 2 were already out of the house. I was just rocking along, doing my little thing, thinking life is good. I had gone back to work part-time at a public relations firm that was there in our small community. And this was a niche firm that just handled Christian authors and organizations. So for an old journalism major, I had just died and gone to heaven, not living in some big major market, but getting to work with some of my heroes and most major publishers, Christian media, TV, radio, newspapers. But I had not worked full time in 25 years. I was a stay-at-home mom that didn't stay at home. That's what I always told everybody. I had founded a pregnancy center, counseling center. I've been very involved in politics. I've been very involved in PTO, everything, So I did not watch soap operas and eat bonbons. And like I said, I'm just kind of rocking along. I've really come to believe about my marriage that it was enough. It was just enough. I had given up a lot of my hopes for huge romantic, not that we weren't intimate. I don't mean it that way, but just being on the same page in a deep level, even though, again, we participated. He was totally supportive of everything I did in the community. And I'm so thankful for that. I always be so thankful for that and having that opportunity. But anyway, I'd gone back to work and so we'd gone out of town and been with some friends of ours that we hadn't seen in several years. And, we just spent some time with them. I didn't think of anything happening that was different than anything else. My former husband had started working out of town, which he had not done for years. He was operations manager for a company and just didn't have to do that anymore. He pretty much ran the company, but he'd been going out of town for several months. And I didn't even know where he was staying. I mean, I didn't keep up with it. There was just no reason for me to question that. And so, but there was a time that I couldn't find him on the weekend, that a couple of 3 weeks before. Then after we saw our friends and I'm talking to my friend on the phone and that we'd been with and telling her I couldn't find him over a weekend. And she said, well, I'm praying that you see what you need to see. Now, MJ, I'm going to try to describe to you what happened to me that moment. I'm standing out in the front yard. It's an evening and I'm waiting for several ladies to come over and we're going to plan a wedding for one of my son's best friends. Getting the mail. I'm on the phone and she said, I'm praying that you see what you need to see. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, I've never not known where my husband is. And I'm praying you see what you need to see. My stomach totally turned over and I could not breathe. Yeah. And she hung up on me. I think she was afraid she was going to say anything else. And I can tell you from that moment, in about 6 weeks, I lost 20 pounds.
Yeah.
So I go back in, the ladies come over, we have a wonderful time of, preparing this shower. I can't breathe, I can't think.
Oh my.
He's
Yes.
in the other room getting ready for a hunting trip. And when it was over, I went in and I said, this friend says I need to see something. What's going on? I'm not happy. You're not happy. And I think we can be happy with other people.
That's what he said to you.
That's what he said to me. And I have to tell you, in the beginning, I thought, oh my gosh, you realize we're not happy. This is good news. I've been trying to say we're not happy for a long time. But then, of course, that was very short lived but the answer is not counseling or working harder or getting whatever. It's that we can be happy with other people. So right there, you know, um, what happened to me in that moment? And I know I want you to just expand on that as much as you want to. What would you call that?
Shock.
Mm.
Shock, that moment of um, disbelief. So you heard something that you did not expect. It was emotionally overwhelming. And in that moment, when you hear, I'm not happy, you're not happy, when he said that, you said, on one hand, I thought, oh, he can see it. He can acknowledge the problem. Very quickly followed by his solution was, and I think we should see other people. Now that moment, he was your person. He was your buddy. The two of you have been doing life together. And now your person says, I think we should see other people. And so in that moment, you experience what we name as trauma. That was a traumatic moment. Trauma is when, at its very simplest, we experience something that is two things: emotionally overwhelming, and it threatens our sense of safety. And when someone finds out that their person who does life with them, who's supposed to keep them safe, says something like, I want to see other people, that is emotionally overwhelming. And you had a moment of shock. What? A moment of disbelief. It threatened your sense of safety. This was the man that I make up you had intended to spend the rest of your life with. And now he's speaking of leaving. And at that moment, there was a lot you didn't know. This was the very first moment of what we call discovery.
Mm.
And in that moment, your brain perceived danger, right? We have a part of our brain called the amygdala. This part of our brain is designed to detect danger. Our amygdala works really, really fast. It actually detects danger in 1/100th of a second. It's designed to work very quickly. And so in that moment, when he said, I'm not happy, you're not happy, maybe we should see other people, your amygdala went, danger! And a biological process started. At that point, adrenaline was released into your body. Adrenaline is designed to help people either fight danger, run from danger, or freeze, play possum, and basically hope the danger doesn't eat us, get us. When adrenaline courses through someone's body, Cheryl, they experience their heart rate often goes up, right? Adrenaline makes our heart beat faster. Because our heart is beating faster, our blood is pumping through our bodies. And so very often we have temperature fluctuations. Sometimes we'll have a hot flash, we'll overheat. It could even be hot, cold, but temperature fluctuations. When we experience that adrenaline, our breathing changes. If danger is coming, we don't need to go, danger. Like, we don't need a full breath, right? If danger is coming, we only need to breathe from the top half of our lungs, right? So we can run, so we can fight, so that we can freeze. We just need a little bit of air to keep us going, but we don't typically take deep breaths. And so in that moment, when you said, I couldn't breathe. We make up, you did breathe because you are still here. So breathing did happen, but it felt maybe constricted, like you couldn't get a full breath. Now, the other thing that adrenaline does, it impacts our digestive tract. So adrenaline, let me talk about what happens in the whole digestive tract. For some people, adrenaline causes like some kind of heartburn or acid reflux that can happen in this part of the digestive tract. For some people, they experience stomach pain. For some people, they feel nauseous. They feel like they're going to throw up, or they do throw up. For some people, as we keep going down the digestive tract, they can get an upset stomach. They could have diarrhea. For some people, they get everything. The adrenaline disrupts the whole digestive tract. And so you described in that moment, you couldn't breathe, that feeling of, I cannot get a full breath. And you had some stomach distress. And that is from the adrenaline, right? You heard something that was traumatic. Your amygdala detected danger. You got hit with adrenaline. You had these experiences of, it impacted your breathing. It impacted your digestive tract. And Cheryl, you even said, over the course of the coming weeks, you lost a significant amount of weight. For some people in that place of distress, they can eat. They might eat a lot. Maybe they soothe themselves through food. For other humans, they cannot eat. There's a rejection. Food doesn't taste good. They are not drawn to eat. It looks different for different people, but it is a normal human response to trauma, to shock.
Something you just said also made me think of, I have taken diet pills. I've been around long enough that I remember the fin craze. Some of our viewers might, remember that, but which I think is outlawed now. But I just remember that's really adrenaline. That's what an amphetamine
Yes.
increases your
Get your heart rate going.
And so the very thing that we take that adrenaline for to keep us from eating so we lose weight is what was happening to me.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Sometimes people in a place of experiencing a traumatic event lose strength in their legs. I've heard for some people when they experience betrayal, they fall to their knees. For some people, we can call their nervous system might go up, might amp up, and they find themselves in maybe a fight stance. They're yelling, they're very excited, not in a good way, but what is happening? For some people, their nervous system goes hypo. They fall to the ground. Things sound like wah, 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 wah. They can't. It's a loss of functioning. We don't really get to choose how our body responds to trauma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that there are soldiers who spend a lot of time training, trying to regulate the natural responses that happen in the brain. For you, you are living your life. There was some disappointment in your marriage, but overall, things were good. Even having the grief and the trauma of your mom having something really traumatic happen to her brain and it impacted her functioning. Even in that, I could hear this part of you that was resilient, that was continuing to live. And then this moment happened and you didn't see it coming, but you had a normal human response to a traumatic event.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And as I want to speak to anyone who's listening, the point of us talking about this is that you know and understand that what you experienced was a physiological happening. I love what you just said. You could not help that. And I think, and again, as primarily speaking to women of faith or the Christian tradition, I think we can think, oh, I shouldn't have thought that. I shouldn't have said that. I'll tell you as we go along through this story, it was not pretty on my end. You would not have known I was a good Christian girl on some of the things, but,
Well, let me speak to that, Cheryl.
yeah, go ahead, please.
It is very hard to think logically and critically through a traumatic moment. So people will do behaviors, they will say things, they will do things in a moment of being traumatized that they might not otherwise ever do. It might even be outside of their value system. But it's very hard to think critically when we're having a traumatic moment, because in that moment, our brain is surviving.
Mm.
In that moment, the amygdala says danger. And then the amygdala is very dramatic. It either is danger or it is not. And so we go on with our life, and the amygdala is like, not danger, not danger, not danger. And then something happens in 1/100th of a second. The amygdala says danger. And now we are in survival mode. When that adrenaline hits us, Cheryl, it raises our heart rate. And when our heart rate gets over a certain rate, I do believe it's 100 beats per minute, that impacts our frontal lobe, this part of our brain right behind our forehead. The frontal lobe is the part of our brain that controls impulses and critical thinking. So this part is impacted. So we have some control over impulses, but it is limited. We struggle to think critically. We might have some ability to think. It might be really, really limited or impacted. So to try to make decisions or figure things out in a moment of survival is really challenging for we humans. So people they will say and do things that they might have to apologize for later or manage later because it's not their normal.
Mhm, mhm. And, I've said so many times, and I even told my mom before she died, which was about 5 months after the divorce. I think her sickness saved me from doing a lot of those things, because where I couldn't function to think critically in a lot of ways, there was still that emotion of protecting her. And
Yeah.
so it I guess there was, something that happened that allowed me to have some, cognitive ability to not kill anybody. That was one of my prayers when as we move along in the story, as the Lord to help me not kill anybody and not embarrass my children. And so, because those things happen, don't they?
They do. I do want to touch on this part of something you just said that I think is important for our listeners to hear. Um, when betrayal is discovered, when betrayal happens, a human may have several emotions show up at one time. They may experience shock. They may experience confusion. What just happened? There might be some embarrassment or shame that can happen for some humans, where their experience is, this thing just happened to me, but I don't want anyone to know. Right? I'm overwhelmed. I'm confused. I'm hurt. I'm sad. I'm experiencing grief. And in that place where the frontal lobe is being impacted, people have to decide, who do I tell and how much do I tell? So humans are trying to use a discernment process. Who gets to know what just happened? How much do they get to know? I'm hurt, I'm scared, I'm angry, I'm overwhelmed, I'm feeling 15 emotions. And I have to make a choice about disclosure. And it can be a really hard process. Humans have to figure that out day by day, moment by moment. Who is safe enough to tell?
Yeah.
Who can I tell who won't judge me or my family? Who can I tell who won't tell me what to do unless I ask?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's important. We could get people telling us what to do and hearing conflicting messages. And ultimately, it's each human's decision to make decisions about our own life. And so in that place, we do need people, right? We heal in relationship. We need people to be with us when we experience trauma and betrayal. Um, but it might take us some time to figure out who is safe in us, who is safe enough to know our business.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's so good. And I think that's a really good segue to move into really talking about attachment disorder or attachment. I think we're going to talk a little bit about attachment first, because what you just described is really attachment to all these people, even choosing what you were talking about. And so as we before we get more into the betrayal trauma, which we will do that in another episode, I want to be sure that you have the opportunity to really talk about the attachment and tell us more about that, and what an attachment disorder is, because we need to know what attachment is first.
Yes, it plays into what we're talking about here about betrayal trauma. So when we choose our person, when we go on the buddy system, we attach with another human, and that's a reference to bonding with someone. When betrayal happens, when we perceive our person is no longer with us, they are maybe against us or they've left. When we perceive abandonment, perhaps, a human will go into what is called attachment distress. If our attachment is like super glue and we attach with our person, when betrayal or abandonment happens, it is a break in that safety.
Mm.
And when we humans feel alone, we experience distress. It is a human condition. We now have attachment distress. Attachment distress registers as a matter of life or death. It is that dramatic. Remember, our amygdala can only perceive not danger, danger. And when we experience attachment distress, the amygdala gets activated. Danger, I am alone. My person is not with me. We have the same things happen biologically. Adrenaline courses through our body. Our heart rate changes, our breathing changes, our temperature changes, digestive tract distress happens. And in that place, humans will do behaviors out of a desperation, out of a place of what we call primal panic, this place of extreme distress. We might fight to either get that attachment back, or because we're so grieving that the attachment has broken. Sometimes we might flight, we might run away because it is so distressing. Sometimes we might literally freeze, where our bodies can become frozen, we become immobile. Sometimes we can't think, we lose our words. Attachment distress can actually look like all of those. We might have those experiences back to back. We might cycle through them. So it can feel crazy making to us. What's happening to us? And if we see that happen to someone, what is happening to them? That is a response to the break in attachment. It's called attachment distress, and it can look like what we name primal panic.
So as I was telling the story earlier, and you went through the things that were happening, and you described them as trauma, we were talking there about the trauma and the shock. And now you're saying that the cause of that was the attachment disorder. So a trauma could be caused by other things, but in this case, it is that attachment disorder, or
Or the attachment distress, the break in attachment.